The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the tarmac at Lackland Air Force Base during the annual Wings Over San Antonio Airshow. Thousands of aviation enthusiasts, families, and military personnel had gathered to witness some of the most advanced aircraft in the world perform breathtaking aerial demonstrations. The crowd buzzed with excitement as they waited for the main event, a spectacular performance by the F-16 Fighting Falcon demonstration team. Among the sea of spectators stood Harold Morrison, an 87-year-old man with silver hair and weathered hands that told stories of decades past. He wore a faded bomber jacket adorned with patches from his service days, leaning heavily on a walking cane as he slowly made his way through the crowd. His eyes, though clouded with age, still held the unmistakable spark of a true aviator. As Harold shuffled toward the front of the viewing area, hoping to get a better look at the aircraft he had only dreamed of flying during his own military days, he became the target of cruel whispers and mocking laughter from a group of younger spectators. "Look at that old fossil," sneered a man in his 30s, wearing expensive aviator sunglasses and a designer polo shirt. "What's he doing here? Probably thinks he's still fighting World War II. His friends chuckled, and one of them added, "Yeah, someone should tell Grandpa that his war stories aren't impressive anymore. These modern jets would blow his ancient planes out of the sky." A third member of their group pulled out his phone and began recording Harold as he struggled to find a spot to stand. "This is going on social media," he laughed. Old man trying to relive his glory days at an air show. Harold pretended not to hear the comments, but his shoulders sagged slightly with each cruel word. He had faced enemy fire, survived crash landings, and served his country with distinction. Yet these thoughtless comments cut deeper than any physical wound he had ever received. The elderly veteran finally found a small space near the rope barrier, carefully lowering himself onto a folding chair he had brought along. He pulled out a small notebook and a worn photograph from his jacket pocket, a black and white image of him standing next to a P-51 Mustang, his pilot's wings gleaming on his chest, a broad smile on his young face. The mockery continued as more people noticed Harold. Some pointed and whispered, while others made loud comments designed to embarrass him. "Hey, Pops," called out another young man. "You know they don't make planes with propellers anymore, right? Welcome to the 21st century." Harold's hands trembled slightly as he tucked the photograph back into his pocket, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the runway where the F-16 demonstration team was preparing for their performance. Just then, the announcer's voice boomed across the airfield. "Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the runway as Captain Sarah Phoenix Rodriguez prepares to demonstrate the incredible capabilities of the F-16 Fighting Falcon." The crowd erupted in cheers as the sleek gray fighter jet taxied into position. Captain Rodriguez, a decorated pilot with over 2,000 flight hours and multiple combat deployments, began her pre-flight checks while communicating with the control tower. As the F-16's engine roared to life, Harold's eyes lit up with a mixture of admiration and longing. Despite his age and the cruel treatment he was receiving, his passion for aviation burned as brightly as ever. The demonstration began with a thunderous takeoff that sent vibrations through the ground and into the bones of every spectator. Captain Rodriguez expertly maneuvered the F-16 through a series of impressive aerial maneuvers, barrel rolls, steep climbs, high-speed passes, and precision turns that showcased both the aircraft's capabilities and her exceptional skill as a pilot. Halfway through the demonstration, Captain Rodriguez was performing a low-level pass when something caught her attention through her canopy. Using the aircraft's advanced optical systems, she focused on the crowd below and noticed an elderly man in a bomber jacket being surrounded by a group of younger people who appeared to be harassing him. Even from her altitude, she could see the man's military bearing and the way he held himself despite his advanced age. Something about the scene below didn't sit right with her. As a military officer, she had been taught to respect her predecessors and understand that her ability to fly advanced aircraft like the F-16 was built on the sacrifices and innovations of previous generations of aviators. Captain Rodriguez made a split-second decision that would change the entire atmosphere of the airshow. Instead of continuing with her planned routine, she radioed the control tower. "Tower, this is Phoenix. I need to make an unscheduled landing. There's something I need to address on the ground." "Phoenix, is there a mechanical issue? Do you need emergency services?" came the concerned reply from air traffic control. "Negative, Tower. Aircraft is functioning perfectly. This is a personal matter of military courtesy. Requesting permission to land immediately." "Phoenix, you're cleared for landing. The crowd is going to be confused, but you are the pilot in command." The announcer, initially puzzled by the sudden change in the demonstration, quickly adapted. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears Captain Rodriguez is making an unscheduled landing. Please remain in your positions while we determine the reason for this change in programming." The F-16 touched down smoothly on the runway, and Captain Rodriguez taxied directly toward the spectator area where Harold was sitting. The crowd fell silent, unsure of what was happening. The group that had been mocking Harold suddenly looked nervous, realizing that the pilot might have witnessed their behavior. Captain Rodriguez shut down the engine and popped the canopy. She removed her helmet, revealing shoulder-length dark hair and a face set with determination. Climbing down from the cockpit with the help of ground crew, she walked directly toward Harold, her flight suit crisp and her bearing confident. The crowd parted as she approached, and the young men who had been mocking Harold tried to blend into the background, but Captain Rodriguez had already spotted them. She stopped directly in front of Harold, who looked up at her with surprise and confusion. Without hesitation, Captain Rodriguez came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. "Sir," she said in a voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Captain Sarah Rodriguez, United States Air Force. It would be my honor to know your name and your service history." Harold, taken aback by this unexpected attention, slowly rose from his chair with the help of his cane. His voice, though aged, carried the unmistakable authority of a veteran pilot. "Harold Morrison, sir. I mean, ma'am. Technical Sergeant, Army Air Forces, 8th Air Force, 351st Bomb Group. P-51 Mustang pilot, European Theater, 1,943 to 1,945. Captain Rodriguez's eyes widened with genuine respect and admiration. "Sergeant Morrison, you flew Mustangs in World War II? In the European theater?" "Yes, ma'am. 73 combat missions over Germany. Escort duty for the bombers, mostly. Shot down 3 enemy aircraft, crash-landed twice, and somehow made it home each time." The crowd around them had grown completely silent, hanging on every word of this unexpected exchange. The young men who had been mocking Harold now looked ashamed and uncomfortable. Captain Rodriguez turned to address the entire crowd, her voice carrying the authority of her rank and the passion of her calling. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand something very important. The man standing before you is not just an elderly spectator at an air show. Technical Sergeant Harold Morrison is a member of what historians call the greatest generation, the men and women who fought to preserve the freedom that allows us to gather here today." She gestured toward Harold, who stood straighter despite his age, pride beginning to replace the hurt in his eyes. The P-51 Mustang that Sergeant Morrison flew was one of the most advanced fighter aircraft of World War II. It had a maximum speed of 437 miles per hour and could climb to 41,900 feet. But more importantly, it was flown by pilots like Sergeant Morrison, who used their skill, courage, and determination to protect bomber formations deep in enemy territory. Captain Rodriguez paused, looking directly at the group of young men who had been causing trouble. Every advancement in aviation, from the P-51 Mustang to the F-16 Fighting Falcon, has been built on the experience, sacrifice, and innovation of pilots like Sergeant Morrison. The jet I fly today incorporates lessons learned from every generation of military aviators who came before me. She turned back to Harold, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "Sergeant Morrison, I need you to know that pilots like you are the reason pilots like me can do what we do. Your generation didn't just win a war. You laid the foundation for everything that came after. The fly-by-wire technology in my F-16, the advanced avionics, even the tactical doctrines we use today, all of it traces back to the experiences and innovations of World War II aviators." Harold's eyes filled with tears as he listened to Captain Rodriguez speak. It had been decades since anyone had acknowledged his service with such understanding and respect. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, I never expected. Thank you." Captain Rodriguez wasn't finished. She reached into her flight suit and pulled out her pilot's wings, the same style of wings that Harold had earned over 7 decades earlier. "Sergeant Morrison, I want you to have these. They represent the unbroken chain of military aviation excellence that connects your generation to mine. Every time I pin on a new set of wings, I'll remember that I'm carrying on a tradition that you helped establish." She handed him the wings, and Harold accepted them with trembling hands. The crowd, which had been completely silent during this exchange, suddenly erupted in thunderous applause. But Captain Rodriguez still wasn't done. She turned to face the young men who had been mocking Harold, her expression stern but not unkind. "I noticed that some people in this crowd were treating Sergeant Morrison with disrespect before I landed. I want you to understand something. Disrespecting a veteran, especially one who served in combat, is not just morally wrong. It's a betrayal of the values that our military exists to protect." The lead troublemaker, his face red with embarrassment, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we didn't know. I mean, we're sorry. We were just fooling around." "I'm not the one you need to apologize to," Captain Rodriguez replied firmly. "And fooling around is no excuse for cruelty. The freedom you have to fool around at an air show was paid for by men like Sergeant Morrison." The young man turned to Harold, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, we're really sorry. We were way out of line. Thank you for your service." Harold nodded graciously, showing the kind of character that had carried him through combat missions over occupied Europe. "Apology accepted, son. Just remember that everyone you meet has a story worth respecting." Captain Rodriguez then made an announcement that sent the crowd into a frenzy of excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do something that's never been done before at an air show. I'm inviting Technical Sergeant Harold Morrison to join me for a special flight in the F-16. Our maintenance team is going to install a passenger seat, and Sergeant Morrison is going to experience modern military aviation firsthand. The crowd went wild with cheers and applause. Harold looked stunned. Ma'am, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm 87 years old, I don't think. Sergeant Morrison. Captain Rodriguez interrupted with a smile. With respect, sir, you've survived 73 combat missions in World War II. I think you can handle one peaceful flight in an F-16. 20 minutes later, after a thorough medical check by the base flight surgeon and the installation of a temporary passenger seat, Harold Morrison found himself strapped into the back seat of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, wearing a borrowed flight suit and helmet. As the canopy closed over them, Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the intercom system. Sergeant Morrison, this flight is dedicated to every World War II aviator who paved the way for pilots like me. Hold on tight, sir. You're about to experience what you helped make possible. The F-16 roared down the runway and lifted into the Texas sky, carrying with it a living piece of aviation history. For 15 magical minutes, Harold Morrison soared through the clouds at speeds he had never imagined possible during his days flying the P-51 Mustang. Captain Rodriguez performed gentle maneuvers designed to showcase the aircraft's capabilities without overwhelming her elderly passenger. She narrated every aspect of the flight, explaining how modern avionics worked and drawing connections between the flying techniques Harold would have learned in World War II and the methods used in contemporary military aviation. The basic principles of flight haven't changed, Sergeant Morrison, she explained as they flew over the Texas landscape. Energy management, situational awareness, air-to-air tactics. You understood all of these concepts 7 decades ago. We just have better tools now. When they landed, Harold was beaming with a joy that made him look decades younger. As he climbed out of the cockpit with assistance from the ground crew, the entire crowd gave him a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The video of Captain Rodriguez stopping her demonstration to honor Harold Morrison went viral within hours. News outlets across the country picked up the story, and Harold found himself interviewed by major television networks, sharing his wartime experiences with a new generation of Americans. The young men who had initially mocked him became some of his biggest supporters, asking him to share stories of his military service and helping him establish a social media presence where he could connect with other veterans and aviation enthusiasts. Captain Rodriguez and Harold maintained a friendship that lasted until his passing 3 years later, at the age of 90. She attended his funeral in full dress uniform, and his family asked her to deliver the eulogy. Harold Morrison taught me that respect for our predecessors isn't just about good manners, she said at his memorial service. It's about understanding that every generation builds on the foundation laid by those who came before. The technology changes, the aircraft evolve, but the courage, skill, and dedication required to serve in military aviation remains constant. The story of that day at Lackland Air Force Base became legendary in military aviation circles. It's now used as a case study in Air Force leadership courses, demonstrating how a single act of respect and recognition can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The F-16 that Captain Rodriguez flew that day was eventually retired and put on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. A plaque next to the aircraft tells the story of Technical Sergeant Harold Morrison and the day a modern fighter pilot stopped her demonstration to honor a World War II veteran. Harold's bomber jacket, the one he wore to the airshow that day, is now displayed in the museum alongside the plaque. Visitors often stop to read his story and learn about the P-51 Mustang pilots who helped win World War II. The photograph Harold had been carrying, the one showing him as a young pilot standing next to his P-51 Mustang, is also part of the display. Next to it is a photo taken that day at the airshow, showing him with Captain Rodriguez after their flight in the F-16, both of them smiling broadly. Captain Rodriguez went on to become a general officer, but she always said that the most important flight of her career was the 15 minutes she spent in the air with Harold Morrison, connecting past and present in the endless sky that belongs to all aviators, regardless of the era in which they served. The air show at Lackland Air Force Base still takes place every year, and it now includes a special ceremony honoring veteran aviators. A scholarship fund established in Harold Morrison's name provides educational opportunities for the children and grandchildren of military veterans, ensuring that his legacy of service continues to impact future generations. The story serves as a powerful reminder that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not in the sky, but in the simple act of treating others with the dignity and respect they deserve.